Today's class, what we're going to discuss is in continuation where we left off yesterday, of course. And if you remember, the first step of an SDLC is planning. During the planning phase, what happens is the senior leadership of an organization, mostly from the business perspective, gets together and decide to implement a system or decide to implement a project. How do they come up with such a decision? That's a real question. Why does a team or an organization, not a team, but rather an organization, comes up with such an idea that let's build a system, let's build a new application? Why and how? There are almost two scenarios possible. One of the two. Either there is a problem which they are trying to solve through technology, or there is an economic or financial opportunity which they are trying to bag through implementing a system. Now, a business leadership, if decides to implement a system or build an application, that's one thing. From a business perspective, it may make sense. Sure, but technically, is it possible? Technically, is it doable? Technically, is it even affordable? Who will answer all these questions? The IT project manager, the IT leadership, your project manager, your project sponsor, your director. These guys, you, the BA, will be reporting to these guys. So they will come up with the estimation. They will come up with the idea that, okay, if you want us to build a system like this, what you just explained, it will take us at least a year. It will cost us around $10 million. We will have to hire at least 8 people. So that's what happens in a planning phase. The planning phase of an SDLC. Your project manager, the PM, the IT PM, will do the heavy lifting. He's the one who is doing most of the work here. If you, the BA, is hired by then, great. If not, well, you will be hired after this phase then. But if you are hired and you are involved in the planning phase, what would you be doing? Not much, to be honest. You may take some notes here and there, may contribute to some documents, contribute, not create from scratch. You won't. Now, during the planning phase, of course, the project manager will have to create some deliverables. A PM will create some deliverables. Formal documents which will have to be created and would require approval of the leadership. It's a formal document in a specific format. Who will create this? The PM. So what's your role in this? Almost nothing. There might be some areas where you as a BA will contribute and make some additions or may create a write-up or something, and that's fine. But I want you guys to fully understand what a PM does so that when you are working in the industry along with your project manager, you should know what his role and responsibility is and what your role and responsibility is. There should be a clear distinction between what he's supposed to do and what you are supposed to do. So what I'll do is, I will briefly go over the templates of a project charter and a project plan, which your PM will be creating. Okay, but as I said, you may make some contributions here and there. Eventually, when you work your way up and you become a project manager yourself, then yes, this is something you will be creating. Now, this is a template, okay? A template from a certain organization out there. I think they call it CDC. It's some department of the state or some federal government entity. I don't know. I took this template from the internet. Whatever information I take it from the internet and I share during these our classes, I have to specify the source of these documents or information. So this is coming from an organization, CDC. They own the copyright. Does Wish Consulting own the copyright? No. Can you use these templates for your work, or when you are working as an analyst or project manager in an organization? You don't have to, because whatever organization you will be working for, they will have their own templates. There are thousands of examples out there. They're pretty much similar to each other. So, what do we do? When I say we, who's we? The project managers. What does the project manager do? Well, he takes his template. Based on the discussion during the planning phase, he will input some information, populate some information. What is this? Version history. What is he doing? Well, he's maintaining version control. When he creates his document for the first time, that's the first version. The name of the author, the date this version was created, approval date, and of course this is the initial draft. Somebody else comes in, or maybe after discussion they make some more changes, it becomes version number 2. Whatever updates they make, we have to notify note down the updates here, document the updates here. This is version control. When you create a document for the first time, that is not the final copy. It will go through series of changes based on recommendations and discussions with other stakeholders. Whenever changes are discussed and suggested and recommended, the author will have to make the change and describe the change, and then they move on. So this is the version history. For any documentation, even for a BA, you have to maintain the version history for traceability purposes and liability purposes. Table of contents, just a simple index, nothing too much to discuss here. Introduction, okay. The first section is purpose of project charter. What is the purpose of this document? The purpose of this document is to highlight the big picture of the project which we as an organization, CDC, will be implementing in 2019. That's the purpose of this document. It will list all the high-level business plans, project and product overview, some high-level summary of the product or the project. If you are building an application, describe it. High-level business perspective. Don't get too much technical. High-level business perspective, that's it. What if we don't implement this project? What is the alternative? When Netflix decided to build a website, an app, so that people could watch or stream TV shows and movies and whatever they wanted, they came up with this idea and they built it. If they didn't build it, what's the alternative? The alternative is they are going to lose out to their competition, which is Blockbuster and Redbox or whatever. They're going to lose on a big economic opportunity. That's the alternative. If you're trying to solve a problem by implementing a technical solution, an IT solution, a software solution, and you don't do it, what's the alternative? The problem persists. When Chase Bank implemented their website, the web portal, and the apps, the mobile phone app, what was the purpose of these applications? To enable the users, the customers, the account holders to do a number of things or do certain activities with their accounts on their own. They don't have to rely on a banking branch. They don't have to rely on a banking executive or a customer service executive to do certain things. Like wiring money. You can wire money from your phone, which you did for these classes, for example. So if you don't build that solution or build that project, what's the alternative? A PM has to describe all of that. The scope or the objectives. What are the objectives of this project or the system? Describe it. Bullet points. High level bullet points. We are not discussing anything technical here. High level. A snapshot of high level requirements. If you, the BA, are present during those planning meetings, you may have understood, or at least you may have gotten at least a brief idea of what exactly we are trying to do. We, the team. So the project manager can expect you, the BA, to create something like this. Hey, can you create a high level bullet list of requirements? You write them, document them, send it to the PM. PM populates it here. A project manager is also required to list down the major deliverables which will be delivered to the client or the stakeholders during the 1 year implementation, during the 1 year of SDLC. There's a project charter, then there's a project plan, then there's a project schedule, then there's a requirements review document, design review document, user acceptance testing document, deployment plan. All these are deliverables which will be delivered to the business stakeholders over the period of project implementation at different time frames. What are those? When will those be delivered? Everything is documented. Duration, timeline of the project. That's how it looks like. A project manager is required to break down the entire implementation by each day, each week, and each month. Let me expand a little bit on that. If you, all four of you, are business stakeholders, I am the PM. You come and tell me that, hey, we want you, Dhruv, and your team, the team of BAs and programmers and testers and architects, to build a system for us. What does it take? I will say at least 1 year. How many people? Well, I need to hire at least 12 people. How much would it cost? $8 million. I can't just throw out numbers just like that. As a project manager, I have to break down the project, the schedule and the timeline of the project into different parts. How much time will it take for planning? How much time will it take for requirements? How much time will it take for programming, testing, deployment, everything? How will I come up with these numbers? Based on my understanding of what is being expected from the system. What exactly is this project all about? Based on that, I will come up with those numbers. When a project manager comes up with those numbers and those time frames, he documents all of that in a tool called Microsoft Project, MS Project. Just like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, there's Microsoft Project. On the left hand side, they list all the activities required for this implementation. You may not be able to see it. Let me zoom in a little bit. All the different activities which will be carried out during the 1 year implementation. Programming, testing, everything. A project manager will define the activity and the start date and end date. When is the anticipated start date for that activity? What is the anticipated end date for that activity? Based on that, it will create all these bars on the timeline based on the start and end date. Whoever that activity is assigned to, his name will appear. This activity is assigned to Richard Miller. This one is also assigned to Richard Miller. This one is for Mary Williams and Karen Martin, and so on. This is the project schedule. This is the schedule of the project. Based on his understanding, based on his best judgment. Who's he? The project manager. Based on his judgment, he will come up with all the activities listed, start date and end date, and the software will create, what software? MS Project will create all these designations in the calendar. This is created in MS Project. It's simple. It's a simple tool. If you get a chance, play with it. And then finally the budget. How much it's going to cost, where will the money come from, whatever number he comes up with. The PM. So this is the project charter. Simple. I didn't discuss any contents. I just gave you a brief idea of how project planning is done. Any questions so far, guys? Anything to discuss before I proceed?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Who approves the project charter after the project manager prepares it?
The leadership, the business stakeholder leadership.
Okay.
There's a team of people, business stakeholder leadership, and then there's a project sponsor who's likely to be a VP or a director. They will approve the project charter.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. Does that answer your question? Also, the CTO, the Chief Technological Officer, will have to approve the funding. You won't hear this a lot being a BA, but behind the scenes, this is what happens. A CTO will have to approve the funding. Okay? Now let's discuss, hold on. Let's discuss another template called project plan. Very similar. Sometimes they use only one of them, sometimes they use both. Depends on the organization. Again, version history, same thing. Nothing too different about this document either. Table of contents, just a simple index. Purpose of project management plan. What's the purpose of this document? To highlight the high-level plan for the implementation of the anticipated system, which will be implemented between 1/1/19 and end of 2019. That's the purpose. What is the executive summary? High-level summary. What exactly is the nature of this project? If you're building a system called Netflix, sure, describe it. It's a it's a video streaming service available on the website and the mobile application platform. Scope management. What exactly is the scope? What does it do? What does it cover? All of it. What is the work breakdown structure? Pretty much the same thing like this. I'm sorry, I have to switch between applications. Pretty much like this. Maybe not the entire chart, but breakdown of all the activities. What is the deployment plan? When will the project be deployed? End of 2019? Sure. What is the plan? How will it be deployed? Who's responsible for code migration? What technologies will be used? Everything. Change control. What is the change control management? You know, in an SDLC, let's say planning is done, requirements is done, design is done, People are working on the program, the code, and all of a sudden, in middle of programming, business stakeholders come up and say, hey, you know what, we apologize, but we forgot to tell you about this particular requirement. We forgot, sorry. Can you please also build this requirement? Can you please add this requirement to the list? Can you also add this requirement, this feature, that functionality? Any change requested in middle of the implementation has to go through a change management process. If you guys as a team are building a system, building a project, and in middle of implementing a project, somebody else comes in and says, you know what, we know the requirements are approved, but however, this particular change or this particular feature needs to be added. Can you please do it? That can jeopardize the progress of your project, but you still have to accommodate it sometimes. What are the strategies, how it is done? We'll discuss that later. But that is called change management. It has to go through a certain process. The project manager, the PM, will decide that process. The strategy has to be listed down here. Schedule and time management, same thing. Oh, by the way, the chart which I just showed you on MS Project, it is called Ant chart. G-A-N-T-T. G is silent. Ant, they call it Ant chart. G-A-N-T-T. Double T. Yep, you just create it and post it here. What are the milestones? Same thing. All the deliverables. What date they will be created and delivered. Project schedule, high level schedule, pretty much the same thing. It will be done over 1 year, first couple of months for requirements, then 3 months for programming, 3 months for testing, and so on. Any dependencies on the project? Any financial or requirements based dependencies? We'll discuss that in detail. PM will list it. Cost budget. How much will it cost? Where will the money come from? Funding, everything. Quality management. What is the testing strategy? How many resources will be dedicated to testing? What is the time frame for testing? Who will test it? What is the strategy for not meeting the testing deadline? Everything has to be documented. Human resource management. Who all will be involved? How many people? Who are the BAs? Who are the testers? Who are the architects? Any particular communications which need to be managed? Communications like what? If you are building a project like Netflix, there will be some advertisements. Who will manage those advertisements? What is the content of those advertisements? If you're launching a product or software, will be there some advertisements? Sure. Will they be notified? Who's they? The consumers, the users. Maybe. You know, it's like when people use their online web portals for their bank accounts. I use US Bank and Chase and all these. Sometimes I get a notification that, you know, a Chase Bank is going through a new look. It has new features now. Do you want to explore those features? So I am being communicated that there are some new changes, new functionalities available on my web portal. If I want to explore those, yes or no. If I want to, sure. That communication. Communication matrix, just the details. Who is responsible for those communications? Who will create those messages? What is the frequency? Mechanism, everything. Is it online? Is it a pop-up on your website? Whatever. Risk management. Every project, every implementation has certain risks. Time-based, financial-based. A PM is required to understand those risks and document those risks. Okay, what's the strategy of mitigating those risks? List of those risks under the risk log. Issue management. If there are any issues with the project, how will they be tackled? Who will work on those? What's the strategy for this? Documented here. Procurement management. How many people are involved? Who will be assigned to what department? How will be the different resources used? What are the different, if any particular software license has to be purchased, how many licenses do we need for that application? Compliance related planning. Any healthcare or financial project, any banking project is heavily regulated by the government. Let me say that again. Any financial or healthcare organization is very heavily regulated. So any project they implement has to be within the boundaries of the rules and regulations set by the government. So not only you have to make sure that whatever you're doing is perfect without any bugs or errors or defects, but also within the guidelines of the government. And that's it. This is the approval signature section of all the senior leadership. Their name, title, role, whatever. So, my point is, let me summarize the whole thing, guys. A project manager is responsible for documenting the high-level project plan and the strategy for implementation of a project. Okay, you, the BA, will have to fully understand what the strategy is. How will we implement this project? Okay, based on those guidelines, you have to work on a number of activities. If this project plan says that the requirements gathering session will kick off on 1st of February, you will have to schedule those chat sessions and requirements gathering sessions from 1st of February. Any project, before it is started, before it is kicked off, it has to be formalized in terms of effort and time estimation. Everything is formalized. It's documented. Approved, only then the project starts. There are risks involved. There are dependencies. There are different kinds of communications. When Netflix launches new TV shows and movies, I am notified on my account. That is a communication right there. So does this particular project involve any communication? Yes or no? If yes, okay, what's that communication? Are we sending letters? Are we sending emails? Are we sending pop-ups on the website? Everything needs to be documented and it has to be strategized. Does that make sense, guys? Are you so far so good? Can I move on to another topic? The core topic for today. Any particular questions, thoughts, or comments before I proceed?
Drew, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So, when the project manager, when he's trying to create the end chart for giving the timelines to stakeholders, so will he communicate with every department, each and every department, to see how much time each department takes to complete the task? And based on that, will he prepare the chart, or will he just assume how the task will be done?
He may have to communicate with certain SMEs and certain departments, yes. He may have to.
Okay.
Yes, he will involve those people and say that, look, we need to build this project in 1 year. Okay, that's a deadline. How can we effectively do this? How can we streamline processes? If he's talking with the development team, that he'll have to take their input as well. Yes, a project manager doesn't decide everything on his own and then just commits to the stakeholders without consulting with different teams. No, he does not.
Okay.
It is consulted. Yes.
Okay.
It's a good question, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else, guys? Okay. So let's start with our. I'm sorry. Uh, you can see my screen, right? The presentation. Did I share the right application? Yeah, it should be okay now. Okay. So yesterday we discussed SDLC, right? Software Development Lifecycle. SDLC is a very generic term, it's a very generic term. There are different flavors of SDLC, different styles of SDLC. Just because SDLC is structured in such a specific fashion, excuse me, that doesn't mean that everybody in the world, in the tech industry, has to implement projects according to those guidelines. Every company is different. And over the period of time, they have developed different styles of implementation. And that's exactly what we are going to discuss today. So, with that being said, the most common and the most simple form of SDLC is waterfall model. In waterfall model, what happens is the first step is planning, cost estimation, time estimation, project charter, project plan, all that stuff is created for the entire project. Next step is requirements or analysis. A BA like yourself will gather and document requirements for the entire project. Do you notice I use the term entire project? What does that mean? Let's say you as a team are trying to build an application called Netflix. So the first step is planning. When the planning is done, money has been allocated, resources have been hired. When you start gathering requirements, you come into those meetings with a mindset that you'll be gathering requirements for the entire system. Not in the one meeting though. Don't get me wrong, not during one meeting. No. Of course, multiple JAT sessions, multiple requirements gathering sessions. But you will not be done with requirements until you have finalized your requirements for the entire system. That's the plan. Then you do design work for the entire system. When programming starts, programmers write the code for the entire system. Over the period of 3 months, 6 months, maybe more. And then the project is tested over the period of few months. And then the project is finally deployed. Waterfall is top to bottom. When you get into a certain phase or get into a certain a phase of SDLC, you work on the entire system. You keep that in mind and then you work. Okay, that's waterfall. How is it any different from what I discussed yesterday? It's not. It's not. It's pretty much SDLC. It's a flavor of SDLC, the most generic and the most simple form of SDLC. That's what it is. Waterfall, top to bottom. Whenever you are working on a project, whatever phase you are in, you work for the entire project, entire system during that phase. How is it any different from others? It is different. What is different? Agile. Agile is another style, another flavor of SDLC. How? Instead of building the entire application Netflix at one time, what they do is they divide the project into X number of parts, 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever number of parts called modules. Each module is developed over a separate sprint or iteration. Sprint is the right word. I want you guys to use this word. They divide the project or the product into X number of parts, and each part is called a sprint or iteration. Iteration of 1 to 4 weeks each. It's a 12-month project. Sure, the first month is planning. And then they divide the project into 10 different parts, 4 weeks each. 10 months, project is done. In the end, they do some more testing, and then they launch the product. How is it any different? It is different. They do requirements only for that particular module. Now, what does that mean? What do I mean by module? Let's take the example of Netflix. When you are building a product like Netflix, instead of writing requirements for the entire system means you are gathering requirements for TV shows, movies, and documentaries, and everything, all of them. How to record, not how to record, but yeah, how to download those movies, how to add movies to your favorites, all the functionalities of the system. Instead of doing that, they divide the project into X number of parts. In this module or in this sprint, we will work only on how to download movies. In another sprint, we will only work on managing your choices. In this part, we will work only on the international movies. I'm sorry I use the word part, but it's a module, it's a sprint. You divide the entire system into X number of functionalities or X number of modules called sprints. Each sprint is dedicated only to that module. When you start this project in an agile environment on 1st of January, you spend 1 month on planning, and then you start with the sprints on 1st of February. During the month of February, you will work only on international movies. During the month of March, you will work only on comedies. Another month, you will work only on the download functionality. Another month, you will work only on, what other stuff you can do on Netflix besides watching? Your account management, probably. You can activate your account, activate or deactivate, upgrade, downgrade. So it goes through requirements. By the way, in Agile, you don't have exact requirements, you have user stories. I'll show you how they are done. Okay, so user stories, design, programming, and testing. All of that is done only pertaining to that module or that sprint. That's it. And then you move on to another sprint, and then you move on to another sprint. So after first month of your implementation, you have a working product, working prototype ready. At least a small functionality working, ready. You started this project, you kicked off this project on 1st of January, you spent 1 month on planning, you started with the first sprint on 1st of Feb. By end of Feb, you have this small functionality working, for which you have gathered the requirements, documented the requirements, design is done, programming is done, testing is done. What module is this? Well, maybe international movies, or comedies, or thrillers, or something. Something is ready. And then you move on to another functionality. That is called Agile, the iterative module, the iterative methodology. It's different from waterfall. Is it confusing? Probably. Let me simplify it. Agile versus waterfall. You see the top row highlighted in blue? Look at the left side of the picture. It says project start. Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3, Sprint 4. The entire system has been divided into 4 sprints. In the first sprint, you do requirements, design, programming, testing, done. Move on to sprint 2, requirements, design, programming, testing, done. You move on to sprint 3, and then sprint 4. Project is ready. There's some regression testing and some integration testing in the end, but that's another story. But project is ready. Whereas, look at the bottom half of the picture, waterfall. When you are doing requirements, you're doing requirements for the entire system, all of Netflix. When you do design, you are designing the entire system, all of Netflix. Same thing with programming, same thing with testing, everything. When you move from one phase to another, you don't go back. That is waterfall. It goes from top to bottom. It doesn't go back. Whereas in Agile, you always go back. Why and how? For another module, for another sprint, another functionality. You go back to the requirements and programming and testing. And then you go back again to requirements and programming and testing. That is the difference between Agile and Waterfall. Does it make sense, guys? Are you with me so far? Any questions?
Dhruv, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. In the waterfall model, what if the scope changes in the middle?
That's a very good question. It is hard. Any scope change or additional request to implement an additional feature or functionality is called scope creep. CREEP, scope creep. So any change request or scope creep in waterfall is really hard to implement. It's a lot more challenging. It jeopardizes your timelines, your commitments to build the system by end of the year or by whatever date you have committed. So you raise a very good question, and any scope creep or change request in a waterfall is a lot more challenging and is poses a lot bigger risks to the timelines and the success of the project. Yes, it can be done, but it is harder. So for example, during testing, if stakeholders come and say, hey, you know what, you missed this feature. You said, yeah, we missed this feature because you never told us to build it. Well, I think we did. Well, it's not in the requirements. We showed you the requirements. They say, yeah, maybe then we forgot. Well, you forgot, then, okay, what are we supposed to do now? No, build it. We need it. Who's saying all this? Who's making all these demands? Stakeholders. During testing, programming is already done. In the middle of testing, they're coming up with a new feature. So you, the BA, will work through the change request form, change request implementation and everything. I'll discuss that. But it's complicated. It's hard. In Agile, it's not that hard. And I'll tell you why. Does it partially answer your question? Because I want to expand on that a little bit in the next slide.
Yes, Dhruv. Yes.
Okay. Let's discuss more differences. In waterfall, before I dive into differences, let me tell you some basic nature of these methodologies. These are software development methodologies, right? Waterfall and Agile. They are two different methodologies. Waterfall is little, is for when you work in waterfall, you will see a lot bigger teams comparatively. They're much bigger teams, much more resources, and it's it's a little slower in pace. I'm not saying that you as a BA will have a lot of extra time on your hands. No, you will be busy, but it's a little slower in pace. There's not a time crunch hounding you or every minute. No. In waterfall, things are a little bit comparatively a lot more relaxed, a lot more laid back, and a lot more time and resources are allocated in waterfall because you are building something over a period of 1 year. So ample time and resources are dedicated to requirements. You get 3 months to gather and document requirements. 3 months, for example, for the entire system. There's a lot of time to discuss back and forth. In Agile, they are not very focused on requirements. You know what happens in Agile? Let's say you start with a certain sprint on 1st of February. You will ask some questions, you will facilitate some meetings, you will ask at least discuss few requirements, you document them. By second or third day, developers will start writing the code. Then you discuss more requirements, they'll write more code. And they'll show you your progress every day. They don't spend that much of time on requirements and documentation. Who's they? People in Agile. They don't. They discuss requirements, start writing the code. And then they show it to the stakeholders. Stakeholders like it, fine. If they don't like it, they want another change, they will make a change. So in Agile, it's easier to for the team to make changes because they are constantly working with stakeholders back and forth. Waterfall is comparatively little more laid back. Lot of time is spent on requirements. Lot of time is spent on documentation. Agile, not so much. As I said, rather you ask this question. Change request, don't you think it's harder? Yes, it is harder. In Waterfall, change request is harder. Yes. Agile is a lot more susceptible for any changes proposed by the business stakeholders. It's very change request friendly. First couple of days, you gather few requirements, not all of them, but few of them. Programmer starts writing the code. They come back, show you the product. You, the team, the BAs, stakeholders, everybody. They like it, great. They don't like it, they'll make a change. Waterfall, as I said, will have bigger teams. Agile is smaller working groups. Smaller groups. Product owner, Scrum Master, BA, few developers, testers, SMEs, working in one room. They gather together. They gather every day, discuss the requirements for few hours. Developers leave. They start writing the code. Smaller, very close-knit teams in Agile. Smaller teams. Waterfall, as I said, is a little slower in pace comparatively. Again, you'll be busy, but slower in pace comparatively. Because in Agile, you have a deadline, which is the end of this month. You have to not only do the requirements, programming and testing, but everything has to be perfect by end of this month. You will be on your toes. All the resources are on their toes constantly in Agile. In Waterfall, programming is not initiated once the programming phase is started. You won't see any progress. You won't see any working prototype. You won't see any product working until the programming starts. But in Agile, every month there's programming, and every month you see at least a small part of the product being developed. So partial product development is possible in every sprint. Some part of the product is developed and you can see that it's working. It is now being tested. So these are some major differences between Waterfall and Agile. Change request or scope creep. Okay. Change request is something when stakeholders want you to change something. They don't like it. They don't think it is something what they were expecting. That is called change request. Scope creep is when they want you to add additional feature, additional functionality on top of whatever is already approved and documented in the requirements document. That is called scope creep. Change request and scope creep. They both are done through the same process, which is the change request process, and how it is done, how it looks like, I'll show you. But yes, there's a slight difference. Now, does that answer your question? Make sense, guys? So far, so good? Okay. Now, Waterfall and Agile are two different and most important methodologies. Then there's another one, which is RUP, Rational Unified Process. IBM back in the day came up with this idea. They formalized this process. RUP is not a very popular methodology, to be honest. Okay, and it's pretty much consolidation of few phases into one. Instead of doing so, for example, in RUP, what happens is the first phase is the inception phase. Okay, so planning and requirements gathering and documentation is consolidated into one phase called inception phase. And at the end of this phase, the author is required to create this document or deliverable called lifecycle objective milestone. Okay, after the first phase. Second phase is elaboration phase. A lot of design and architecture is discussed and elaborated. Again, a document is created called lifecycle architecture milestone. Third phase is the construction. A lot of programming and some programming related documentation is done. Again, there's a deliverable operational capability milestone. Question is, do you need to remember these phases, or do you need to remember the names of these milestones or these documents? No. RUP is not very popularly used. I'm just using it so that you know what it is. I'm just discussing it so that you know what it is, right? So it's just a consolidation of few phases of an SDLC into one, and 4 phases. There's another one, transition phase, when the deployment, post-deployment support and training of the product is performed by the BA. Okay, so that's called transition phase. And again, there's a milestone called product release milestone. So, as I said, it's not very important, even from the interview perspective, but you should know what it is, and that's why I'm discussing it with you. And you don't have to remember the name of these milestones and anything. Okay, but if by any chance you get an opportunity in the industry, you should know what it is. So far so good, guys. Waterfall and Agile are the most important ones, and you'll be very likely working in either of these two environments. So far so good?
Yes.
Now, something a little off topic here, or little on the unrelated note. I wouldn't say unrelated, because Agile people definitely do this, and now outside Agile, even Waterfall and other people are also doing it. What is it? A Scrum meeting, a daily stand-up meeting. Okay, and what happens is every day in the morning, every day, Monday to Friday or whatever the work days are, the entire team will get together. First thing in the morning at 8 o'clock or 8:30, whenever your work schedule starts, your team will get together in the morning and in a group. This meeting will be facilitated by your project manager. Every member in the team will answer 3 questions. Every member in the team will answer 3 questions. The first question is, what did I do yesterday? So for example, I am the PM, all 4 of you are my team members, and every day in the morning we get together in a conference room. We stand in a circle, or I mean, we don't really have to stand, but we just get in a circle, and then I ask 3 questions to all of you, one by one. Okay, so Rohit, what did you do yesterday? Well, I did finalize the requirements. I also prepared this document, and I created a couple of reports, and so on. Rohit, what will you be doing today? What is your plan for today? Well, today I will be working on some more reports, and there is a certain document which needs some more work, and I'll be working on that stuff. There's another issue related to that particular module. I'll be fixing that issue. Rohit, are there any challenges, any problems you're facing? Is there something you're trying to work with and you cannot find an answer? Is there something else which is not working out for you? Is there any problem with your computer or any network related problem, or there's a particular software license which you require and it's not working? Let me know. So I, the PM, will ask you 3 questions, all of you, one by one. What did you do yesterday? What will you be doing today? What are some major roadblocks or challenges you're facing, which I can help you as a PM? This daily stand-up meeting is becoming a very popular trend in the tech industry. I want you guys to somehow specify this during an interview, that I, as a BA, business analyst, would participate in a daily stand-up call in the morning, and then I would answer these 3 questions. What is the advantage of this? I, as a project manager, will get a regular status updates from everybody in my team and would know who's doing what. If Rohit today tells me that he's going to work on this certain issue, tomorrow I can follow up with him. Hey Rohit, I think yesterday you were supposed to work on that issue. How did that work out? Were you able to finally resolve it? If yes, what is the outcome? If no, what are the problems? What are the challenges? What's going on? Can I help you? Do you need some other help? Should I assign another resource to this? So, from project management perspective, I need to keep a tab on everybody's progress on a daily basis, and that's why I conduct this meeting, and you, the BA, as one of the resources of the team, will be attending this meeting. During your interviews, somehow say it. Discuss your familiarity with this daily stand-up call. Make sense, guys? That's all I have for today. Any questions, thoughts, comments? What do you think?
I have one question, Dhruv.
Go ahead.
So who all will be participating in the Scrum call?
The core team.
So, including developers, BA, PM, and testers, the whole team, right?
Yes, possibly, yes. If
That's all.
I'll tell you this. In an agile environment, everybody will be there. Yes. Okay. The product owner will call this meeting and say, hey, that okay, I want to know what did we do yesterday, today, and challenges and everything. In some cases, there is a group of BAs, 5 BAs being led by a project manager. Okay, all 5 of you BAs report to that project manager, and your project manager is conducting this meeting only for the BAs, because he manages only the BAs. Programmers are managed by their own manager, so they will have their own meeting. Okay, so this project manager needs to keep a tab on, okay, so what is every resource doing in this in my team. Whoever your manager is will be conducting this meeting for the core team. Make sense?
Yes.
What else? I'm gonna pause the recording right here, but keep going.